Hello, my crafty friends. Well, today I am going to share a fun little one-sheet wonder template. I'm going to show you how to make 3 cards from just one sheet of paper. Hi, it's Lynn Dunn from Stamptastic Designs. Thanks so much for joining me today. In this episode of Stamptastic TV, I have 3 different card ideas to share with you, which were created from one 6x6-inch piece of designer series paper. Now, the cards in this video feature the All About Autumn Designer Series paper pack. So this is one of the papers from the pack, and that is what I created the cards with for today. But I'm also going to actually use one of the other pieces of paper from this pack because I just want to show you how versatile this one-sheet wonder is so that you can use it with any pattern paper that you have on hand. Now, the cards also feature the Autumn Leaves bundle from Stampin Up. So this particular bundle has a variety of different fun images in it. Now, besides the stamp set, if you get it in a bundle, it comes with a variety of different fun dies that you can use to decorate your cards. All right, so let me show you the template for creating these cards. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is we are going to cut up our 6x6-inch piece of designer series paper. So for the cards that I just shared with you, I used that pumpkin paper. This time we're going to use the leaves. So what I'm going to do is just place this in my paper trimmer, and I'm going to cut at the 4-inch mark. So I'm going to line up the edge at the 4-inch mark, and I'm just going to cut off this bottom section. So we'll set this aside for the moment. And then we're going to take our piece and turn it. So once you cut off that 4-inch section, then just turn it and cut it at 3 inches. So you're going to end up with 2 pieces that are 3 by 4 inches. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take these pieces and we are just going to cut them in half at 1.5 inches. So just cut this right in half. And then I just want to create a little 1.5-inch section here and a 1.5-inch section here. So let's put this in and cut off 1.5. So if you remember 1.5, then you got this template down to a science. And now we're going to cut off 1.5 from the bottom. So this is what your piece will look like. With the 1.5, this is 1.5 by 1.5, and so is this piece. All right, so we're just going to move these off, and I'm going to try to keep them in that order. And then we're going to do the same thing with this one. So cut it at 1.5. Then we're going to cut off 1.5 from the top, and we'll set that to the side. And then this piece, we're going to cut off 1.5 from the bottom. All right, so that's what our paper looks like. So you want to keep your paper arranged so that when you put it all back together, you can see the pattern. So you want to keep it in this position, if that makes sense. I'll show you in just a moment. All right, so now we're going to take this 2 by 6-inch piece, and we're actually going to cut it down to 5 inches. So I'm just going to cut this little piece off the bottom. So this is the only piece that I didn't use on my cards. Now you certainly can if you want, but that's the only piece of this paper I didn't use. And so now I have a 2 by 5-inch piece. So I'm just going to cut it in half at 1 inch. So I have 2 pieces of pattern paper that are 1 by 5 inches. All right, so here's what our pieces look like, kind of all laid out here. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to just kind of add the different supplies that I used for each of these pieces, these 3 sets of pieces, because these pieces are going to create 3 different cards. So for this first one, what you're going to do with these small pieces is you're going to add them to a piece of cardstock, which is cut at 3.5 by 4.5 inches. So all these pieces are going to go on this cardstock piece like this. And then for this particular card, I used Early Espresso for the card base. So that will be the first one. So for the second card, it's the same thing. I just have a different color for my 3.5 by 4.5 inch piece of cardstock. So this is Early Espresso. So I'm just going to add my pieces on here. And then this one is going to get adhered to a copper clay card base. And then these last two pieces, these 1 by 5 inch pieces, are just going to get adhered to a 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of copper clay. So I'm going to be adhering these on the edge. And then in the center, I have a 1 1/2 by 5 inch piece of very vanilla cardstock, which I did some embossing on using the Distress Tile embossing folder. You can use any embossing folder that you have on hand, but we're going to add this one to a very vanilla card base. So I will have 3 different layouts with each of the pieces that we cut from that 6 by 6 inch piece of paper. Okay, so now let's talk about how we're adhering these pieces. So you want to adhere them so that you have a little bit of that cardstock, this cardstock color, showing in between each piece. So I'm going to start with this one. So this has 2 pieces, which are 1 1/2 by 1 1/2 inches. And I'm just going to adhere them so that I leave, about 1/4 inch between each piece, roughly. And then this bottom piece is 1 1/2 by 2 1/2. And then I have another 1 1/2 by 2 1/2 inch piece up here. And then this last piece is the 1 1/2 by 1 1/2. All right, so that's the basic layout. And it just kind of gives the illusion of like looking through a window pane, because you have this would be kind of an awkward window, but you know what I mean. And then we're just going to go ahead and adhere this right to the card front. All right, so that is the first layout. All right, the second layout is really identical to this first one. The only difference is that I changed out the colors. So here you can see I have the early espresso, which is what I adhered the designer paper to. And then I have the copper clay in the background for my card base, but it's the exact same layout. And then the last layout, we are going to start by adhering these pieces, these little 1 inch pieces on the edge of our cardstock. So I'm using a 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of copper clay cardstock. And I'm really just coordinating the colors of the cardstock with the colors that are in the particular designer paper. So I'm going to adhere this first piece. This is a 1 by 5. And then the second piece is my embossed piece. And this piece is 1 1/2 by 5 inches. And then this last piece of designer paper is 1 by 5. So it creates a fun little panel style card. And then we're going to take this piece and we are going to adhere it to our very vanilla card front. All right, so that is what the layout looks like for card number 3. Okay, so there are the 3 layouts. So now we are ready to decorate them. Okay, for the decorations, I started out by just stamping a little greeting on a scrap piece of very vanilla cardstock, just using some early espresso ink. So I have one for each of the cards. And then I cut out 3 different leaves using one of the dies from the Autumn Leaves bundle. And so I have one of these for each of these cards. And then the last thing I did was just tie a bow using some linen thread. So I have one for each of these cards. So let me show you how to put them together. So to assemble the card, all you do is add a little glue dot right on the corner of this greeting. So I'm adding it down on the left lower corner. So I'm just going to add a little glue dot there. And I've already added some dimensionals on the back here. So I'm just going to adhere that little knot for this linen thread right on that glue dot. And then I'm going to take these off, and I'm going to adhere this to my card front. And then I'm going to take that leaf with a couple dimensionals and just pop that up on the top of the card. So that's how you create the first one. Now let's decorate the other two. All right, so now we have 3 different cards created from one 6x6" piece of pattern paper. They're just super simple and they're just very pretty. The designer paper is absolutely gorgeous. So what I'm going to do now is just bring back the other ones so that you can see what they look like with just some different pattern paper. So these 3 were created with the leaves, and these 3 were created with the pumpkins. They all have the same focal point or same design, but they all look very different because of the different colors and the different pattern paper. Okay, so there you go. Now you have a very simple one-sheet wonder template that you can use with any 6x6" pieces of pattern paper that you have on hand. And if you enjoyed these card ideas, feel free to download the printable tutorial. You can find the link in the description below this video. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by liking it and sharing it with your friends. And leave me a comment below to let me know what you enjoyed most about the video and the cards shared here today. Have a fun and creative day, my friends. Take care.